The day an entire galactic fleet locked down Nexus 17, nobody suspected it had all started with half a turkey sandwich. 3 weeks earlier, the civilian trade station drifted quietly along the edge of the Perseus corridor, its steel spine illuminated by the pale glow of a distant blue giant star. Outside the panoramic windows of the station cafeteria, streams of cargo freighters slid through space like slow-moving fireflies, their engines casting amber reflections across the glass. Inside, the lunch crowd had already thinned. The scent of synthetic coffee, reheated soup, and machine lubricant lingered in the recycled air. Ethan Walker welcomed the silence. After 10 hours crawling through maintenance shafts barely 24 inches wide, replacing worn plasma conduits, and resetting malfunctioning environmental sensors, silence felt earned. He lowered himself into his usual seat near the observation window, setting down a dented metal lunchbox beside a thick repair manual. At 34, Ethan had developed routines that required little thought. Sit by the window. Eat slowly. Watch the ships come and go. Avoid unnecessary conversation. It was easier that way. Ever since his wife had died 4 years earlier during a civilian shuttle accident, solitude had become less of a choice and more of a permanent roommate. He opened his lunchbox. Turkey sandwich. Apple slices. Potato chips. Exactly the same as yesterday. Across the nearly empty cafeteria, someone caught his attention. A woman sat alone at the far corner table beside the largest observation window. Ethan had noticed her before. Every day for the past week, she appeared at precisely 12:15 p.m. Every day, she occupied the same seat. And every day, she left without ordering food. She simply sat there, hands folded neatly in her lap, staring at the stars. She was unmistakably alien. Her skin carried a faint silver-blue sheen that reflected the cafeteria lights like moonlight on water. Long white hair flowed over the shoulders of a simple, gray travel coat. Even seated, she carried herself with unusual grace, her posture perfectly straight, her expression distant and unreadable. Some of the station workers had started whispering. Rich runaway. Diplomat. Spy. One mechanic had jokingly called her the Ghost Princess because she never spoke to anyone. Ethan wasn't interested in rumors. But loneliness recognized loneliness. He took a bite of his sandwich, glanced toward her again, then sighed quietly. Mind your own business, he muttered to himself. He lasted less than 30 seconds. Picking up his lunch tray, Ethan crossed the cafeteria. The woman noticed him immediately. Her luminous violet eyes lifted, calm but cautious. Up close, she looked younger than he had expected, maybe late 20s by human standards. There was something striking about her face, but it wasn't beauty that stopped him. It was sadness. Deep, quiet sadness. Ethan placed half of his sandwich and the unopened bag of chips on the table. You look like somebody who forgot lunch, he said with a small shrug. Happens to me all the time. The woman's eyes shifted slowly from the food to Ethan. I did not forget, she said softly. Her voice was musical, precise. I simply do not eat here. Ethan nodded as if that made perfect sense. Well, in case you change your mind, nobody should have to spend lunch alone. He turned and started back toward his table. Behind him, he never saw the silver-blue woman stare at the sandwich as though she had just been handed something infinitely more valuable than food. The next afternoon, Ethan arrived at the cafeteria 12 minutes later than usual, grease still smeared across one sleeve of his dark maintenance uniform. A coolant regulator had failed in Habitat Ring C, and he had spent most of the morning wedged inside an access tunnel listening to alarms chirp in his ear. By the time he pushed through the cafeteria doors, the lunch rush had already faded into the familiar low hum of conversations and clattering dishes. He immediately looked toward the observation windows. She was there. Same seat. Same gray coat. Same distant gaze fixed on the endless stars beyond the glass. But this time, something was different. The sandwich he had left the previous day was gone. Ethan felt an unexpected sense of satisfaction. He walked toward his usual table, opened his lunchbox, then paused. After a brief internal argument, he changed direction and approached her table again. The silver-blue woman looked up as he arrived. Her luminous violet eyes lingered on him for a moment. You came back, she said quietly. Ethan pulled out the chair across from her. I work here. Kind of hard not to. To his surprise, the corners of her mouth moved ever so slightly. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. Ethan set down his lunchbox. "Did you eat the sandwich?" he asked. The woman lowered her gaze briefly. "Yes." "Good. I was worried station food might have scared you away." Another almost smile appeared. "It was acceptable." Ethan laughed softly. "That is the nicest thing anybody has ever said about cafeteria food." For several seconds, silence settled comfortably between them. Outside, a heavy cargo hauler drifted past the station windows, its engine glow painting soft amber streaks across the polished floor. Finally, Ethan extended his hand. "I am Ethan, by the way. Ethan Walker." The woman studied his hand as though evaluating an unfamiliar scientific instrument. After a brief hesitation, she gently placed her own hand in his. Her skin felt cool, almost like polished stone warmed by sunlight. "My name is Lasara," she said. "Nice to officially meet you, Lasara." She slowly withdrew her hand. "Human customs are unusual." "You have no idea," Ethan replied. "Trust me, humans think humans are unusual too." For the first time, Lasara produced a genuine smile. It transformed her entire face, replacing the sadness with something brighter and younger. Ethan found himself smiling back without realizing it. As they ate, Ethan talked about his morning repairing environmental systems and complained about maintenance software designed by engineers who had clearly never held a wrench. Lasara listened intently, asking questions that seemed strangely basic. "Why do you continue performing difficult work if it causes discomfort?" she asked. Ethan shrugged while opening a bag of potato chips. "Because somebody has to. People need heat, oxygen, running water. If I do my job right, nobody notices. That usually means I did it well." Lasara grew thoughtful. "Where I come from, important individuals are constantly noticed." Ethan glanced toward her. "Sounds exhausting." She stared out at the stars again. "It is." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, a chime echoed through the cafeteria, signaling the end of the station's lunch period. Ethan gathered his things reluctantly. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked casually. Lasara looked genuinely surprised by the question. Then she nodded once. "Yes, I believe. I would like that." As Ethan walked back toward Maintenance Sector 4, he did not notice the two sharply dressed figures standing near the cafeteria entrance. Both wore discreet communication earpieces. Both watched Lasara with unwavering attention, and both waited until Ethan disappeared before quietly reporting, "The princess has accepted another meal from the human." Over the next several days, lunch became something Ethan actually looked forward to. That realization unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He had spent years keeping people at a comfortable distance, burying himself in repair schedules, maintenance reports, and endless shifts inside the station walls. Yet somehow, a mysterious alien woman who barely spoke had quietly rearranged his routine. On the fifth day, Ethan entered the cafeteria carrying 2 steaming cups instead of 1. The rich aroma of coffee drifted through the cool, recycled air as he approached their now unofficial table beside the observation window. Lasara was already there. She always arrived first. "I brought coffee," Ethan said, placing 1 cup carefully in front of her. "Fair warning. Human coffee has started at least 3 interstellar incidents." Lasara tilted her head. "You are joking." "Mostly." She examined the cup with the same careful attention she seemed to give everything human. Taking a cautious sip, she immediately blinked. "This beverage is remarkably bitter." Ethan grinned. "That means it is working." To his surprise, Lasara took another sip. Outside the massive observation window, a convoy of luxury liners glided past Nexus 17, their polished hulls reflecting distant starlight like moving mirrors. The cafeteria remained unusually quiet, filled only with the soft hiss of ventilation systems and the occasional clatter of dishes from the serving counter. "May I ask you something, Ethan?" Lasara said after several minutes. "Sure." She folded her hands neatly together. "Why do humans continue social rituals after experiencing loss?" Ethan paused with his sandwich halfway to his mouth. "That is a pretty specific question." Lasara lowered her gaze. "You wear a ring on a chain beneath your uniform. You touch it whenever you believe nobody is watching." Ethan instinctively reached toward his chest. The thin silver chain rested beneath his collar exactly where it always had. He gave a quiet laugh. "You notice everything, do you? Observation is important where I come from." Ethan stared out at the stars for a long moment. "My wife, Megan, died 4 years ago. The words still felt strange. Heavy. Afterward, everybody told me to move on. Keep busy. Meet new people. The truth is, some days getting out of bed felt like maintenance on a broken machine. Lasara listened silently. But eventually I realized something. Ethan continued softly. If you stop living because you lost somebody, then you lose them twice. For several seconds, Lasara said nothing. Then she asked, almost in a whisper, humans choose to endure pain willingly. Ethan shrugged. Usually for people we care about. Something changed in her expression. The sadness he had noticed during their first meeting briefly surfaced again. Where I was raised, she said carefully, attachments are often considered liabilities. That sounds lonely. Lasara looked back toward the endless stars beyond the glass. It is. Before Ethan could respond, movement near the cafeteria entrance caught his attention. Two impeccably dressed individuals had entered. Their dark uniforms were elegant but severe, marked only by a silver emblem Ethan did not recognize. The pair scanned the room with practiced precision before their eyes settled on Lasara. Ethan noticed her entire posture stiffen. The warmth vanished from her face instantly. One of the strangers took a step forward. Lasara rose abruptly. I must leave, she said. Everything okay? Ethan asked. For the first time since they had met, genuine worry appeared in her luminous violet eyes. Please, she said softly. If you ever see individuals like them again, pretend that you do not know me. Without another word, she turned and walked quickly from the cafeteria, leaving behind half a cup of untouched coffee and one very confused human staring after her. Lasara did not appear the next day, or the day after that. By the fourth day, Ethan had stopped pretending he was not disappointed. The cafeteria felt different without her. Larger somehow. Quieter. He still sat at their table beside the observation window, still brought 2 cups of coffee out of habit, and still caught himself glancing toward the entrance every few minutes. Each time, strangers walked in. Cargo pilots. Dock workers. Traveling merchants. Never Lasara. You are staring at the door again, said Maria Chun, one of the station medics, as she passed his table carrying a tray. Ethan frowned. I am not. Maria smirked. You have looked at that door 11 times in 6 minutes. You counted. Medical professionals notice things. She nodded toward the untouched second coffee. Mysterious girlfriend still missing? She is not my girlfriend. Sure. Maria walked away before Ethan could answer. He sighed and looked back out at the stars. Beyond the reinforced glass, a massive or carrier slowly rotated into docking position, maneuvering thrusters glowing pale blue against the darkness. Nexus 17 never truly slept. Ships arrived. Ships departed. Lives intersected for a few brief hours before disappearing back into the void. Maybe that was all this had been. A temporary intersection. A week later, Ethan was halfway through replacing a damaged atmospheric sensor in Corridor 12 when his wrist communicator chimed. Lunch break. He almost ignored it. Almost. 20 minutes later, he stepped into the cafeteria carrying his usual lunchbox. The familiar scent of coffee and warm bread drifted through the room. Then he froze. Lasara sat at their table. She rose immediately when she saw him approaching. You came back, Ethan said before he could stop himself. A faint look of surprise crossed her face. You sound uncertain. Ethan slid into his chair. You disappeared for 7 days. For a moment, Lasara seemed genuinely uncomfortable. I had obligations. Secret agent obligations? Ethan asked lightly. To his surprise, Lasara did not smile. Something like that. Silence settled between them. Ethan unwrapped his sandwich but did not take a bite. Finally, he shrugged. Look, you do not owe me an explanation. Lasara looked down at her hands. Most people where I come from always expect explanations. Well, I am not most people. She studied him carefully, as though trying to determine whether he meant it. Apparently satisfied, she reached into her coat and carefully placed a small object on the table. It was a polished crystal sphere no larger than a marble. Inside, tiny points of silver light drifted like stars. What is it? Ethan asked. A memory crystal. Sounds expensive. It is not. Lasara said quickly, almost too quickly. It simply records meaningful moments. Ethan picked it up. The crystal felt warm. You are giving this to me? Lasara nodded. Among my people, sharing food establishes trust. Gifts acknowledge that trust. Ethan smiled softly. Then thank you. For the first time since returning, Lasara seemed to relax. They spent the next hour talking. Really talking. Ethan told her stories about growing up in rural Montana, fixing tractors with his father, and learning that machines were usually easier to understand than people. Lasara listened with quiet fascination. In return, she described distant oceans that glowed beneath 3 moons and forests where trees sang when solar winds passed through their branches. She never named her homeworld. Ethan never asked. Some secrets, he had learned, were not invitations. They were burdens. And sometimes, friendship meant allowing someone to carry those burdens in peace. 2 days later, Nexus 17 was struck by the worst plasma storm in nearly a decade. The station lights flickered without warning just after noon. A deep metallic groan echoed through the superstructure as emergency systems automatically rerouted power across the civilian sectors. Throughout the cafeteria, conversations stopped. Then the overhead lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Outside the observation windows, ribbons of violet plasma danced across space, illuminating the station hull in pulses of ghostly light. "Well," Ethan said, glancing upward as the ventilation fan slowed noticeably, "there goes my afternoon." Lasara looked toward the windows, mesmerized by the storm. "It is beautiful." Ethan laughed softly. "Beautiful for everyone except maintenance crews." His wrist communicator immediately chimed. He silenced it without checking. Lasara noticed. "You are ignoring your responsibilities." "For 10 minutes, Ethan said. "The station survived before I showed up. It can survive another 10. Something unreadable crossed her face. "Where I come from, ignoring one's duties is unthinkable." "That sounds exhausting too." The corner of Lasara's mouth lifted faintly. The storm intensified. Brilliant waves of charged particles washed across the stars, transforming the darkness outside into an ocean of shifting color. Most cafeteria patrons had moved away from the windows, uncomfortable with the unusual display. Ethan and Lasara remained where they were. Neither spoke for several minutes. The silence felt natural, comfortable. Eventually, Lasara broke it. "Why do you always sit here?" she asked quietly. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Because Megan loved this window." He tapped the glass gently. "When we first moved to Nexus 17, she said this was the closest thing to sitting beneath a Montana sky." He smiled sadly. "She used to bring lunch here every Friday." Lasara listened without interrupting. "After she died, I kept coming," Ethan continued. "At first because leaving felt wrong. Then because staying felt easier." He stared at the swirling plasma beyond the station hall. "Some days, I think I am still waiting for her to walk through those doors." The amber emergency lights reflected in Lasara's luminous eyes. "Among my people," she said slowly, "grief is considered a private weakness. Public mourning is discouraged." Ethan turned toward her. "That sounds lonely." "Yes." Her answer came immediately. For the first time since they had met, Lasara looked genuinely vulnerable. "I have spent most of my life surrounded by people," she said softly. "Thousands of them. Advisors, instructors, attendants." She paused. "Yet I cannot remember the last time someone simply sat beside me because they wished to." Ethan studied her quietly. "You do not have many friends, do you?" Lasara looked down at her hands. "No." "Well," Ethan said gently, sliding the untouched half of his sandwich across the table as he had done on the very first day, "you have at least one now." Lasara stared at the sandwich. Then she looked back at Ethan. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, she accepted it with both hands, almost ceremonially. Outside, lightning-like streams of plasma illuminated the station in brilliant silver flashes. Inside, beside a window overlooking the endless stars, 2 lonely people shared lunch while an entire galaxy remained blissfully unaware. The following week, life on Nexus 17 settled back into its familiar rhythm. Cargo ships arrived. Freight departed. Maintenance requests multiplied with relentless enthusiasm. And every afternoon at precisely 12:15 p.m., Ethan Walker found Lasara waiting beside the observation window. It became routine in the quiet way that meaningful things often do. One afternoon, Ethan arrived carrying a small paper bag from a bakery located 3 decks below the civilian promenade. The warm scent of cinnamon drifted into the air as he sat down. Lasara immediately noticed. "That is not your usual lunch," she observed. "Congratulations," Ethan said, placing the bag between them. You have now officially spent enough time with humans to recognize unhealthy eating habits. He opened the bag, revealing 2 oversized cinnamon rolls covered in icing. Lasara stared at them suspiciously. Those appear nutritionally questionable. Absolutely, Ethan agreed. That is what makes them special. After a brief hesitation, Lasara accepted one. She took a cautious bite. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Ethan laughed. I will take that as approval. Humans consume this regularly? She asked. Only when we are stressed, celebrating, sad, happy, bored, or awake. To Ethan's satisfaction, Lasara actually laughed. The sound was soft and melodic, causing several nearby diners to glance in surprise. Ethan realized it was the first time he had ever heard her laugh. What? She asked, noticing his expression. Nothing, Ethan said. You should do that more often. The laughter faded, but the warmth remained in her eyes. For several minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Lasara spoke. Ethan, may I ask you something unusual? At this point, I would be disappointed if you did not. She folded her hands carefully. If someone concealed important truths from you, would you consider that betrayal? Ethan considered the question. Outside the station windows, a passenger liner slowly disengaged from Dock 7, its engines glowing bright gold against the darkness. Depends on why they kept the secret, he finally said. Fear makes people hide things. So does responsibility. Sometimes people are just trying to protect themselves. Lasara remained silent. Ethan continued. What matters is whether they are lying about who they are inside. She looked directly at him. And if they belong to a world very different from yours. Ethan shrugged. Everybody belongs to a different world from somebody else. Lasara lowered her gaze. You make difficult concepts sound simple. Occupational hazard. Before she could respond, Ethan noticed movement near the cafeteria entrance. The same 2 elegantly dressed individuals he had seen weeks earlier had returned. This time they were accompanied by 3 additional figures wearing formal dark uniforms trimmed with silver. Every one of them was watching Lasara. Ethan immediately saw the change in her. Her shoulders stiffened. The warmth vanished from her expression. One of the uniformed figures approached their table. He stopped several feet away and bowed respectfully. Lady Lasara, he said quietly, your family requests immediate communication. Several nearby patrons turned toward the unfamiliar title. Lasara closed her eyes briefly. I am unavailable. Your grandmother insists. The man's voice remained calm, but his tension was obvious. Lasara slowly rose from her seat. Before leaving, she looked toward Ethan. Please remember what you said today. About secrets? Ethan asked. She nodded. Especially about secrets. Then, without another word, she walked away surrounded by the formally dressed strangers, leaving Ethan alone beside the observation window with 2 unfinished cinnamon rolls and the growing certainty that his friend was far more important than she had ever allowed him to believe. 3 days passed before Ethan saw Lasara again. During those 3 days, Nexus 17 felt strangely empty. He still brought 2 coffees to lunch out of habit. He still sat beside the observation window, but the seat across from him remained vacant. On the 4th afternoon, as Ethan climbed out of an access shaft on Deck 9 with grease covering both hands, his communicator chimed unexpectedly. Maintenance Supervisor Walker, please report to Observation Lounge C. Ethan frowned. Observation Lounge C was located on one of the station's upper civilian levels, a place maintenance workers rarely visited unless something expensive had stopped functioning. He arrived 15 minutes later expecting another malfunction. Instead, he found Lasara standing alone beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the docking bays. The room was empty except for her. Starlight reflected across her silver-blue skin, giving her an almost unreal appearance. You requested maintenance? Ethan asked. Lasara turned. No. Good, Ethan said. Because I forgot my tools. For the first time in days, she smiled. I wish to see you. Ethan relaxed immediately. You could have just come to lunch. The smile faded. I could not. She looked away. Outside, hundreds of navigation beacons blinked steadily against the darkness as ships moved through their assigned corridors. My family found me, she said quietly. Ethan leaned against the window. I figured something like that. You are not angry. Why would I be? Lasara looked genuinely confused. Because I concealed many things. Ethan shrugged. Everybody hides something. She studied him for several seconds. You continue to surprise me, Ethan Walker. Silence settled between them. Then Lasara took a slow breath. I did not come to Nexus 17 by accident. Ethan waited patiently. Where I come from, every aspect of my life has always been decided for me. What I study, where I travel, whom I meet. Her voice softened. Even when I eat, there are protocols. Ethan shook his head. That sounds miserable. It is not intended to be. Still sounds miserable. To his surprise, Lasara laughed softly. Then the laughter faded. I came here because I wanted to know whether anyone could care about me without knowing who I was. Ethan looked at her carefully. And Lasara met his eyes. I found my answer on the first day. Half of a sandwich. 1 cup of coffee. No questions asked. Ethan suddenly felt self-conscious. It was just lunch. No, Lasara said gently. It was kindness. There is a difference. Before Ethan could respond, every light in the observation lounge abruptly dimmed. A station-wide alert tone echoed overhead. Outside the windows, something enormous emerged from hyperspace. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the space surrounding Nexus 17 filled with ships. Not cargo freighters. Not civilian transports. Massive vessels. Sleek silver warships stretching nearly a mile long, their hulls glowing with royal insignias visible even from the station. Throughout the lounge, emergency announcements began sounding. Attention, all personnel. Nexus 17 is entering temporary security lockdown. Please remain calm. Ethan stared through the glass. There had to be hundreds of ships. Perhaps more. Beside him, Lasara closed her eyes. They found me sooner than expected, she whispered. Ethan slowly turned toward her. Lasara, he said carefully, who exactly is your family? She opened her luminous violet eyes. There was sadness in them now, and resignation. I suppose, she said softly. You are finally about to find out. For the next 20 minutes, Nexus 17 existed in a state somewhere between panic and disbelief. Every public screen across the station displayed the same message. Temporary security lockdown in effect. Please remain calm. Nobody remained calm. Civilians crowded observation decks. Crew members abandoned coffee breaks. Entire conversations stopped as people stared through reinforced windows at the impossible sight surrounding the station. The royal fleet stretched across space in every direction. Silver hulls reflected distant starlight like a sea of polished mirrors. Formation lights blinked in perfect synchronization. Smaller escort vessels moved with mechanical precision around a single enormous flagship nearly 2 miles long. Even Ethan, who had spent 12 years working on one of the busiest trade hubs in explored space, had never seen anything remotely comparable. That cannot be normal, he said quietly. Lasara remained beside the observation window, her expression unreadable. No, she admitted softly. It is not. A chime echoed through the lounge. Moments later, the door slid open. 6 individuals entered wearing immaculate white and silver ceremonial uniforms. Every movement they made radiated discipline. The same man who had approached Lasara in the cafeteria stepped forward and bowed deeply. Your Highness, he said respectfully. The matriarch has arrived. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Your Highness. The words echoed inside his head. Slowly, he turned toward Lasara. She avoided his eyes. You are royalty, he said. It was not a question. Lasara nodded once. Yes. Before Ethan could process that revelation, the entire station trembled gently. Outside the windows, a magnificent shuttle detached from the flagship. Unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, the vessel appeared almost organic, its silver surface shimmering like liquid moonlight. Every ship in the surrounding fleet adjusted position simultaneously as the shuttle approached Dock 1. Throughout Nexus 17, thousands of beings watched in complete silence. 20 minutes later, Ethan stood beside Lasara inside Dock 1's reception hall. He still was not entirely certain why he was there. Perhaps because Lasara had quietly asked him not to leave. Perhaps because he could not imagine walking away. The massive docking doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. A cool breeze swept through the chamber carrying the scent of unfamiliar flowers and rain. Then she appeared. The elderly woman who descended the shuttle ramp stood barely 5 feet 6 inches tall. Yet the moment she entered the room, every conversation ceased. She possessed the same silver-blue skin as Lasara, though age had softened it into something resembling polished marble. Her white hair was arranged in an elegant crown, and her violet eyes contained centuries of quiet authority. Behind her walked dozens of officials, advisors, and honor guards. None drew attention away from her. The entire docking bay instinctively fell silent. Lysara stepped forward. For the first time since Ethan had met her, she looked nervous. The older woman reached her granddaughter and embraced her without hesitation. "You disappeared for 43 days, she said softly. "Your advisors are preparing constitutional crises in my absence." Lysara managed a small smile. "I needed time, grandmother." The older woman's expression softened. "I know." Then those ancient violet eyes shifted toward Ethan. Every official in the docking bay suddenly seemed interested in him. Ethan resisted the urge to hide behind a cargo container. The elderly woman approached slowly. "You are Ethan Walker," she said. It was not a question either. "Yes, ma'am." To Ethan's complete astonishment, the most powerful woman he had ever encountered inclined her head respectfully. "I am Seraphina Vane, Grand Matriarch of the Galactic Accord." Around them, dozens of officials lowered their eyes. "And I owe you my gratitude." Ethan blinked. "For what?" Seraphina looked toward Lysara, whose eyes had become suspiciously bright. "Because in 13 years, the matriarch said quietly, you are the first person outside our family who ever shared a meal with my granddaughter simply because she looked lonely." The next morning, every news display on Nexus 17 carried the same headline. Grand Matriarch visits civilian trade station. Analysts across known space immediately began speculating. Diplomatic emergency. Military negotiations. Economic summit. Nobody guessed the truth. Ethan certainly did not. He spent most of the day avoiding reporters, curious station personnel, and one particularly persistent cargo captain who insisted on shaking his hand. By lunchtime, Ethan escaped to the only place that had ever felt normal. The cafeteria was unusually quiet. Most civilians remained glued to public broadcasts covering the royal fleet. Ethan sat beside the observation window and opened his lunchbox. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, potato chips. Some habits, he decided, deserve protection. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You still bring the same lunch." Ethan looked up. Lysara stood beside the table wearing the simple gray coat he had first seen weeks earlier. Gone were the formal attendants, ceremonial guards, and royal advisors. For the first time since the fleet had arrived, she looked relaxed. Ethan smiled. "I figured if royalty was coming, I should not change the menu." Lysara laughed softly and sat down across from him. Outside the observation window, hundreds of silver warships still surrounded Nexus 17. Yet somehow, the old table made them seem very far away. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Ethan finally asked the question that had been waiting between them since Dock 1. "So, you are heir to the Galactic Accord?" Lysara nodded. "Eventually. Your grandmother rules most of known space." "Yes." Ethan unwrapped his sandwich. "That explains the security detail." Lysara lowered her eyes. "You are not upset?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I am still trying to process the fact that the future ruler of the galaxy likes terrible station coffee." To his relief, Lysara smiled. Then the smile faded. "I was afraid," she admitted quietly. "Afraid that once you learned who I was, everything would change." Ethan looked out at the stars before answering. "Lysara, when I met you, all I saw was somebody sitting alone every day without lunch." He slid half of his sandwich across the table exactly as he had on the first day. "I still see the same person." Lysara stared at the sandwich. Her luminous violet eyes shimmered in the station light. "My grandmother wishes me to return home," she said softly. "But I asked for time." "How much time?" "Several months." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "The most powerful woman in the galaxy agreed." A familiar voice answered from behind them. "Granddaughters possess certain negotiating advantages." Ethan nearly dropped his coffee. Grand Matriarch Seraphina stood several feet away holding a cafeteria tray and wearing clothing simple enough that she almost blended into the crowd. Almost. She sat beside them without ceremony. "I wish to experience this famous lunch ritual personally," she said. Ethan blinked. "You came all the way here for cafeteria food?" Seraphina smiled knowingly. "No, Mr. Walker. I came to see the human who reminded my granddaughter that she was a person before she was a title." Silence settled gently over the table. Beyond the observation window, stars drifted endlessly across the darkness. 3 generations. 1 ordinary lunch. No ceremonies. No politics. Just people sharing a meal. Later, station employees would remember the day an empress ate cafeteria sandwiches among dock workers and mechanics. But Ethan remembered something else entirely. He remembered that in a galaxy ruled by power, kindness had still been enough. And as Lasara accepted half of his sandwich with a smile, the stars reflected in her eyes looked a little more human than they had before.